Hi, good afternoon. I'm Daniel Kurtzer. I teach here at the Woodrow Wilson School, and on behalf of the entire university community, we are really honored and fortunate to have with us this week Dan Meridor as a Gruss Lipper visiting scholar. In addition to being a friend of many years, Dan has an extraordinary bio, and I'm only going to give you a part of it to give you a sense of the breadth and depth of his experience. He currently practices law in Jerusalem as the president of the Israel Council on Foreign Affairs, but during many years in government service, he served as Deputy Prime Minister, Minister of Intelligence and Atomic Energy, Minister of Justice, Minister of Finance, and Secretary of the Israeli Cabinet. He was a member of the Knesset, Israel's parliament, from 1984 to 2003, and again from 2009 to 2013, served as the chairman of the Knesset Foreign Affairs and Defense Committee. When I asked Dan how he wanted to be introduced, the most important thing is he is the father of 4 children and 7 grandchildren. I'm also very pleased that Dr. Leora Meridor, Dan's wife, is with us. In her own right, one of Israel's foremost economists and bankers. And so we are fortunate as a community to welcome them in our midst and to hear Dan talk about a couple of things. The formal topic is the dramatic changes in security threats and in the use of military force, but we assume that you might also be interested in the situation after the Israeli elections. So feel free during the question and answer period to address that subject. As we do in these events, I will give precedence in calling on people in the question and answer period to students, but if we exhaust the student questions, feel free to line up at the 2 microphones. Dan Meridor.
Thank you, Dan. Thank you all for coming here. The truth is that the topic I was about to speak about is of great interest to me. I'm not sure that much for some people here. So as Dan said, I'll talk of what I wanted to talk and then talk of what you want to hear. Let's see if we can do both. I thought I would share with you some thoughts that I engaged in recent years, having the experience of dealing with Israel's security problems, which are quite important to us in government and outside of government. We live in an era that is characterized more than anything else by rapid changes, what they would call paradigm changes. The world is changing very rapidly. If I had spoken here 30 years ago, nobody would have had a computer at home. The word Google might have sounded some wrong thing in my throat. The world is changing very rapidly, and these changes change our economy, the way we run our countries economically, change the culture. My children laugh at the same stupid jokes that American children laugh at because they see the same television series. Not stupid, only the good ones, of course. The culture is changing in a way. The English, or rather the American language, becomes a world language. Technology changes all. Borders are not blocking anything. It's really a huge change in, as I said, economy, medicine, what have you, including the world order that we know. It changes, and let me say, I think that when changes occur, it's very important to grasp them in time and try to adapt yourself, or else you really, as they used to say, the generals love to find the old wars, but the new wars are very different. Now, I think that it's a rule that you will agree with, that the stronger and the bigger and more prestigious the body is, the more difficult it is for it to change. They are sure of themselves, and they don't listen to criticism. They know better. Armies usually are very strong, very prestigious, and in time of huge change, to understand the change and adapt yourself to it in time is a great challenge. Think of yourself tried to convince a brigade commander that serves all his life in defense of the country, practices with his officers, and you come to him and say, hey guy, go home, you're not relevant anymore. He doesn't listen to you. I speak of a brigade commander of the Polish cavalry of 1939. He was sure that's the way to defend Poland, with horses. This is the way they did against Russians, Germans, Swedes, Lithuanians, who didn't occupy Poland one or the other time. And he wouldn't listen to you until the German panzer, the German divisions of tanks roamed over Poland. They know in 1 month, he and all his friends, this theoretical guy didn't survive. We live in an era like this of huge changes that affect the world order and the way we see the challenges and the way we have to deal with them. You look at the recent wars that were fought by the United States and Israel, the 2 wars that America fought in Iraq and Afghanistan, spending a lot of money, $1 trillion, something of that sort, quite big number even for Israelis, and losing lives, impressing the whole world with the American technology, and then, in fact, exposing the limits of that power, what cannot be achieved in war. And Iraq is what it is today, and Afghanistan is what it is today. Israel had clashes, I would call them, with the Hezbollah and Hamas. We are much stronger in many ways. The end is not that bad, but it's not a knockout. It's something different. What is happening here? Is the old paradigm exhausted? What should be done to change it and to be in tune with modern and nowadays challenges? I want to specify very briefly some of the challenges. I wrote down some, but I forced myself to speak very briefly to allow for the things that you want to hear, really. One is borders don't matter that much anymore. Borders used to block the enemy. Well, you go over the border with missiles, under the border with tunnels. Borders used to block information. And they don't block it anymore because on the web, on television, you have all that you want to know. Technology, information, ideas, values are now spread all over the world, and borders do not block them anymore. Because of this, human beings, are much more powerful than ever in the past. In a way, in the old days, you had to go to governments or to universities like Princeton or any other university to learn. Now you can sit on an island in Indonesia, and if you click the right button, all the information is there. It's accessible. Somebody called it democratizing information. Everybody has an access. Technology, everybody has an access. Tom Friedman, in a book that he wrote about this era, called this phenomenon the super empowered individual. People can do much more than ever in the past. We're happy about this. But also what we would call the bad guys can do much more than in the past, more damage than ever in the past. We have the weakening of states that cannot control all of it. Some of them are failed states. Around us we see a lot of them. And the empowerment of individuals and groups, what we now call non-state actors. If I look at the Israeli borders and the Israeli army, I met the new chief of staff who's now coming into office these days, and he sat with me to consult on certain things. I told him, you see, you have the greatest army on earth, really great army, very good one. You have one problem. No army wants to fight you. The Egyptians don't fight with us. Almost 40 years, they are in peace with us. Jordanians are the best allies we have. The Egyptians and the Syrians had a good army. They are killing each other. So what are you going to do with the army? So it looks as if it's great because there's no enemy. But there are other challenges, not from states. Think of names that you've heard of: ISIS, Al-Qaeda, Hamas, Hezbollah, Jihad, you name them, Nusra. They're not states. They don't act like states. There's no central command. You know where to hit or where to talk to people. But there are challenges. What do you do with that? It's a new challenge that the greatest army on earth, American or other, whatever number of bombs it has, does not deal with them in the battlefield the way the Germans were hit by the Allied forces in Europe in 1944 or 45. in the Middle East because of that technological change. I think this is the reason we saw what we call the Arab Spring. Think of it, if you remember Cairo, the square, Tahrir Square, Liberation Square in 2011, you saw people like us, young people like us. I'm not that young anymore, but young people, who had slogans and spoke not from the Muslim vocabulary, from the Western vocabulary, about liberty, freedom, no corruption, change of government, right to criticize the government. And we all felt with them. We thought here, at long last, the Arab world that has never seen any democracy anywhere in the world is beginning to adapt what the entire world did, going for democracy. And they were really powerful enough with the, can you say, unfortunate help of some people not far from here telling Mubarak he has to go now. And he is gone. And now you think that the people vote and this is democracy. There's the rub. What do you do in democracy when the majority votes for a non-democratic party? When the majority votes for a party that doesn't want to see really equality for women or a right to criticize the government, what do you do with that? So we saw two forces fighting. One, military rule, dictatorship, call it what you may, authoritarian regime, as Egypt used to be since the days of Nasser and Sadat and Mubarak, or religious forces. Muslim Brotherhood, the movement that was created in 1928 and was banned by all Arab regimes, coming up saying, we have the solution. The logo is, Islam is the solution. You have problems with your neighbors? Pray more. You have problems at work? Be more observant. And they got to power. And you saw things like it all over the Arab world. It's a huge battle over values, of a way of life. The army took back. Who is going to win? Democracy is not there. It's either authoritarian regimes, a ruling family, a king, military authoritarian regime, or religious fanatic regime. Call them Iran, the mullahs, call them Muslim Brotherhood, call them Hezbollah. One could have thought after the American Revolution, 1776, or the French Revolution, 1789, that religion is limited to the personal. It's not running states anymore. Well, can I say God is back in town in politics in a big way in the Muslim world, and it's somewhat dangerous. When you introduce religion to your political aims, it's very rigid. There's no compromise. So you see a huge battle in the values, in the way of life, between forces, and it's not over. The game is not over. We are still in the eye of the storm. The whole system of the Middle East that we know was built with the collapse of the Ottoman Empire in 1914. The war began, the First World War, now 100 years later. Then the British and the French, the colonial power of the day, created states like Lebanon, Syria, Jordan, Iraq, built on nation states, nation identity. It worked. Now it collapses. If you ask people, what are you in Iraq? You wouldn't say Iraqi, you would say Shiite or Sunni. The national identity loses, and the religious identity or tribal identity, like in Libya, gains. Where are the borders between Syria and Iraq? Can you really reconstitute or reshape Iraq or Syria the way they were? We see a huge collapse of a system that has to do with values, with way of life, with government. It's all around us, and a very interesting neighborhood that we live in. So these are changes that occur. Technology has done something else. In old days, in terms of war, you had to have a border against your neighbors, because neighbors could come and do something. Now, because the ranges of missiles, if you like, or if somebody attacking you through the cyber, it's not important who the neighbor is. You need to protect yourselves against the world, the whole world. New York was not attacked from New Jersey. It was attacked from Tora Bora in Pakistan. So what do you do with that? In the old days, you have few enemies. America had the Soviet Union as an enemy. And for 40 years and more, the Soviet Union built a great army, the Red Army, billions and billions of rubles, couldn't kill one American soldier, and then collapsed because it didn't have enough money. In steps a guy called Bin Laden, maybe uses $2 or $3 million and causes damage nobody ever caused in the past. And you say, didn't you know? Yeah, of course we knew about Al-Qaeda, 100 other organizations, very small. And what damage they can do to you is something that we never had in the past, of small organizations that usually have God on their side, helping them. Not in your border, a different world, very, very different from the one that we knew. Can you have a victory which is decisive like May 8, 1945, total surrender, or is it not in the cards anymore? How do you deter people who act like this? How do you react? The worst thing is to think in the old paradigm, because it won't help you here. You need to think anew what you can do about these threats that are developing. It's a number of enemies. Another development which is very interesting and very effective in our case is the fact that unlike previous wars of many, many centuries, wars now are seen real time on the screen when they happen. It has never been the case in the past. Now, Napoleon could have fought the Russians in 1812, and somebody could live in Paris, and he didn't know what's going on in the Russian winter until he saw Napoleon coming home with bowing his head. He understood he lost the war. Had to wait some years for Tolstoy to write War and Peace to know what war looks like, how Natasha and Andrei and Pierre describe the war. Now you see it when it happens on the screen. Now wars are always ugly. Only in certain Hollywood movies it looks different. Telling you from my experience, from other people's experience, wars are ugly. People get wounded, get killed, orphans, widows, houses demolished. Now what happens here? When war is on the screen, you have a reversal of the power in the following sense. If you are too powerful, too long a time, you become a villain in the eyes of all the spectators. If you are very weak, too long a time, you become a tzaddik or an underdog. It happened to us with Hamas and Hezbollah. Everybody wanted us to kill them, to finish them off. Because the war dragged, or in better English, slept a little too long, people forgot how it began. We looked very bad on the screen. I remember Shimon Peres, as Prime Minister, had to stop a whole operation because the Israeli artillery made a mistake, killing innocent people in Lebanon in Operation Accountability in the 80s. You see it on the screen, it changes the world. Now the war is waged and won or lost in two places at the same time, in the battlefield and on the screen. A small country is more hit by that than others, but because war cannot drag too long, you cannot have wars planned for too long. You need to have shorter wars. Changes everything, it's not nice, we don't like it. That's the fact that we have to take into account. In terms of money, President Obama made a speech about 2 years ago saying, we cannot be the policeman of the world, we don't have money to run the entire world. He wants to go to the Pacific. So you need to look for ways that are not that costly, even in terms of money. 5th fleet, 6th fleet, I don't know how many fleets you have, but it's a lot of money. And it's a problem. So I just explained the basics. I don't want to go into details of a rapidly changing world. Some threats are not relevant anymore, and it's good. There's no danger that somebody will occupy the land of Israel or America for that matter, because they cannot do it. But damage they can cause, how do we deal with that? How do we deter them? How do we fight a war against them? What can be done? What cannot be done? I came to it because I confronted it in everyday life when we had to decide what to do in Gaza, what to do in Lebanon, what can be done. And the basic instinct, the knee-jerk reaction would do something that we knew from the past. I always try to warn against it. Look a little farther down the road. What can you do? What can you not do? And an interesting, different word. I would say that the use of force needs to be changed this way. I think we see part of it already happening in our country and in this country. But I'll give you what I think is the way or the main direction that things will take. And we are in the beginning of it, and I put it here for people to think if they have better ideas. I think it's all open. It's a world that all of us live in and need to be concerned with. I think I would call it individualizing the war. I'll explain what I'm saying. In the old wars, by the laws of wars, which is legitimate, you need to kill the king on the other side, to get to the bunker where Hitler is hiding, and that's the way you finish the war. But you can't do that because millions of soldiers stand in the way in trenches, in tanks. So legitimately, you kill millions and millions. Europe saw it repeatedly in its history. And of course, other people, unintended consequences. You see people who get killed along the way. Now, the same technology that changed the world offers us a way to kill the king without going through all this mess. So the new kind of war may be a war that we see now developing. I'll take the American example. You have a target. You send the SEALs to kill it, call it bin Laden. You have other targets, not masses, the very people that are very dangerous, and you send a drone which costs maybe 1 to 1,000 to the fleet, and he does the job, creates other problems if you like. You use different kind of force, which is not against masses, but it's against very accurate, precision-guided munition, accurate targets. For this, you need first intelligence. Now, intelligence is first collecting. You have visual intelligence and signal intelligence, human intelligence. I don't want to go into all of that. A lot of intelligence coming in with technology. Every one of you that walks around with an iPhone or with another phone can be located. You know a lot of everything. So the problem is not that much collecting, but then understanding, integrating this intelligence into something coherent that is important and making it accessible to the leaders to make a decision. And then you need the intelligence for what? To understand the logic of the system that you're fighting. It's not a state. In most cases, if it's a state, it's a different story. What is the logic, how it operates? What is the way to deal with it? You can't destroy, say, 100,000 rockets of Hezbollah. They have about that number. Huge number. You need to understand from all this intelligence how the system operates, what are the 50 or 100 targets that if I hit them, the system collapses. It takes a lot of seichel, a lot of brains, a lot of thinking to know to do that. And then you need to have the information, the intelligence, to be able to have the right information about these X or Y targets, be it human or installation or location, to have it in real time, prepared all the time. It's not always easy, but this is what I think is needed from the intelligence. And then how do you attack them? How do you make sure that they are destroyed if you need to? You don't want to get all your army, what in America is now called boots on the ground, to start walking and marching and losing a lot, and who knows how long it will take. So you need more and more precision-guided munition. It can be missiles or that are, we have a lot of them, America has a lot of them, not statistical, but precision-guided. It can be missiles from a jet, from a plane. It can be from the ground. It can be from a helicopter. It can be from an unmanned aviation, like drones. It can be a unit, like the SEALs or other commander unit that does specific operation, trying to hit a target. And you need to have it all the time ready if things occur, that you give an order and it happens. You don't start to collect evidence or collect information when the war starts. For that, if you can do that, it's a huge task. It's a different world of war. It's a different paradigm of war altogether. It may not bring you a final surrender of the enemy, as I said, like Germany on May 45. But it does give you a way that is 100 times cheaper in terms of money and in terms of lives, and maybe quite as effective if you do it right. The way to do it may even change the rules of engagement in war. If by technology you can really reach a target without killing so many people on the way, maybe one should make it part of the rules of engagement, because we saw so much loss of life without any tangible results that is positive. And there is, of course, the world of defense. For Israelis, the word defense is almost a four-letter word. We attack, we don't defend. Well, we changed. We understood that as the enemy has developed the capability to launch rockets in big numbers against our population, because we don't see a battlefield where the divisions fight other divisions and you need to protect this population. The whole war is between populations. Somebody launches a rocket from Khan Yunis on Sderot, from all populated areas, or in Iraq or Syria. It's all within civilized, or civilian rather, less civilized population, you need to defend yourself. You can't say, I don't defend anymore. So we built the Iron Dome system with a very substantial American help, money-wise. President Obama decision, I have to say. He's not very popular sometimes, but he did that, I have to say. And it gave us good protection in the last war. It's not the whole thing. We have other systems of protection, of defense, active defense, passive defense. But defense is part of the war. It's not something that one does if one wants. You need to defend your population. And there is the use of non-military power, what people call soft power. If I'll come to the Middle East in a minute, but if you think of Iran and the fight, the campaign against Iran, preventing Iran from getting nuclear, there were all sorts of ways that Iran was we tried to stop Iran. I mean all of us. There was a possible military attack people spoke of. According to the New York Times, there was some war under the table, under the screens that had to do with cyber, whether right or not, I can say, but I don't want to say. And there were sanctions that were led, again, by the United States of America, the European Union, the UN in the beginning, and other partners. And it really brought Iran to at least change its rhetoric, its leadership, and hopefully more than that, but I cannot say it with certainty. More than anything else, the use of economic power, of pressure, had an effect on Iran, no doubt about that. And in a way, there's something interesting even here. When I speak of individualizing the war, sanctions were imposed on Russia recently after the invasion of Ukraine and the Crimea. They were not only on Russia. They were on certain people, oligarchs who are close to Putin, individualizing the war, not the masses. People were hit by sanctions. In Iran, the sanctions were against Iran and against the Revolutionary Guard leaders who had their bank accounts under sort of attack in that sense. So the use of non-lethal power, economic power, becomes a very important tool. Israel can do less of this because of course, we are quite good economy, but somewhat smaller than the United States. And we can do less of this in this context, but it was very effective, I think, and hopefully if it is done with Iran with persistence and with no rush, it may even bring better results than so far. Then most of these things call for international cooperation. Now, it's against the genes of intelligence people to share cooperation, to share information with others. It's dangerous, your sources and so forth, but there's no other option. The threat is international, global, so the work against it should be global. And there is much more cooperation. I can again testify that in the 4 years I was in charge of Israeli intelligence in the previous government, the intimacy in the relationship between our intelligence communities, America and Israel, was unprecedented. Unprecedented, both in collecting, in assessing, and, let me put it, operationally. I want to add to this. This is really important. You can't do it alone. Don't do it with us just we are nice people, because I think we can contribute something to this work. The same people are threatening the countries of the free world, and cooperation is very much called for. So the use of soft power and the international community in cooperating in doing that, and the use of power that kills in a more accurate way, I think is where the world is going. It based a lot of different thinking of what war looks like. It is what America is facing now. It is what Israel is facing now. And if we do it in a way together and with others, I think we can. It can yield much better results than what we have seen in the use of the previous paradigm of war that costs a lot, might have been necessary, but did not bring the conflict to an end, and the prices were quite heavy. From there, I want to move. This was the basic thing I want to say about the new paradigm of war. Let me say something about the Middle East and Israel, and not in that respect. I said earlier, the Middle East is changing quite dramatically, and the Arab world is in a disarray, and we don't see the end of it. From one angle, it's good militarily. We don't see a coalition against you. there are threats developing. The rise of Iran into hegemonic position, which they want to have, is a huge problem for us. Not that I see tomorrow a bomb dropped on Tel Aviv, although nobody can tell, but the balance of power and the fact that they knew that we cannot be destroyed for what they believe we have is changing in that sense. And Iran not only thinks about Israel what they think and say Israel should not exist ideologically, religiously, and so forth, they have their ideas about the Arab world, and they want to be dominant there, which is why we saw an unprecedented coalition being built here between Israel and Arab countries against Iran and its very few allies. It's not the usual thing when America has to choose between Israel and the Arabs, which was the case many times. Now it's most Arabs and Israel against Iran, Syria, and Hezbollah, and maybe some small other opponents. Some people in Israel, I don't want to be critical here, you don't know who I mean, love to play the dangers, and this is awful, and this is frightening, and I agree. But there is the other side. There's a lot of opportunities that open up to us now in that dangerous world. About 5 months ago, in November last year, I spent a month at Harvard. I was lecturing there. And the Harvard people in the Kennedy School, can I mention the name here? It's not Wilson, but okay. Arranged a meeting, a public meeting between me and His Royal Highness Prince Turki al-Faisal. You wouldn't know who he is. Nephew of the dead king by now of Saudi Arabia, the Minister of Intelligence of Saudi Arabia for many years. Now, in the past, they wouldn't do it publicly. There was a public appearance, him and me, and I think 100, 200 people in the room. And after we spoke very nicely to each other and about the Middle East, the moderator, the head of the school, Graham Ellison, said, I see here a new alliance, Israel and Saudi Arabia, and nobody said no to this. The only mistake he made, by the way, in the end, he was attacked by students for treating of women unequally and other things in Saudi Arabia. So they said, why do you speak that? I invite all of you to come and see it in Saudi Arabia. So I said, all of us? I said, no, I don't mean you, I mean the rest. but this was a joke I couldn't resist about making. But basically, Saudi Arabia, who never wanted to be seen in public with Israelis, does it. I was one, there were 2 other cases recently. So I think if you open your eyes not only to the threats that one needs to deal with, Iran is one and ISIS and others, but to the opportunities of changing Middle East, to change it in a better way, to shape the new Middle East in a way that is more stable and more good for our cause, better for our causes, I think there are a lot of opportunities. Creating a ad hoc coalition, alliances. Unfortunately, some of them think that America is too soft with Iran, and they find that we are more to their taste. I don't want to go into that now, but I think the fact that there is a threat on these regimes every day from the growing extremism, both on the Shiite side with Iran, Hezbollah, and on the Sunni side, from the Wahhabis and the Salafis. I don't want to go into all those details, but those organizations whose names you hear in the press calls for much more cooperation. So even this is not a one-sided picture, not all dark, not all bright. And a lot remains for the leaders of the countries, including my country, to try to look for those opportunities and make it a better world for us. Egypt, Dan was ambassador to Egypt and Israel, and he knows, well, I can't say both countries better than me, but Egypt better than me. He knows Israel well enough. Egypt was on the verge of being totally inimical to Israel. The Muslim Brotherhood won. The Muslim Brotherhood, for them, we don't exist, we're not legitimate. And to me, in retrospect, this is the best proof of the strength and validity of the peace treaty we had with Egypt. When Begin and Sadat signed the peace treaty in the late 70s, we changed the Middle East dramatically. One said, but it's one man, he cannot. Well, a year later, or 2 years later, Sadat was killed, and the treaty stood, and Mubarak kept it. Mubarak was deposed from his throne or from his chair, and comes Mr. Morsi of the Muslim Brotherhood. Whatever the rhetoric, he didn't dare touch the peace treaty. He didn't speak with us, but the cooperation under the table in the intelligence community continued. And this is even the Muslim brother didn't change. So see how important a peace agreement can be. It's not a proof for the future, but it's a proof. It stood the test of time and of this crazy revolution that takes all the Arab world around us now. It's Egypt of 77. It's Jordan of 94, agreement of peace with Israel. It's other countries who never made the formal peace but accepted us that changed the Middle East in a better way. It's not the end of it. It's not that we already have peace with everybody, but there is a positive trend and a negative one. And as we are fighting the negative one, Iran is one, Hezbollah and others, we need to see if we can promote the positive one at the same time, because things are much more volatile now, and you may be able to influence more. Here comes the Palestinian issue. I don't want to be too long on this because I think your questions will lead me there anyway later. I'm not sure that, let me put it personally, if I were the Prime Minister today, I can bring the Palestinians to a full agreement of peace. Why do I say so? Because we had several governments, all kinds of governments, who tried. Shimon Peres tried, and Rabin tried, and Barak tried. I was with him at Camp David in 2000 for 2 weeks. I was the only stupid guy who thought it was going to be an agreement, because how can they say no? And Olmert tried in 2008, and there was no agreement. It's not only the bad behavior of the Israeli government that some people attribute to us, right or wrong. So I'm not sure that there can be peace immediately now. I'm not saying no, but I'm not sure of it. Especially if you see the split in the Palestinian camp between Abu Mazen and Hamas, and it's not easy. But this leaves open the question, so what? So what do we do? Do we do nothing? Do we continue on the track we are on? Do we change? I think we need to change. I think even if we can't bring peace, we need to act differently, and I leave it open for your questions. Because if we do something on the Palestinian issue that looks more forthcoming and more maybe risk-taking, but in a positive way, we may get much more cooperation with many Arab countries around us that is important strategically to us, not only our image in the world, which is not a small thing anyhow. So we have Israel in very stable, small but very stable country, where the economy is flourishing. The GDP is over $40,000 per capita. It used to be 20-something thousand about 15 years ago, dollars per capita per year. We have unemployment, which is at 5.5% now. It's really nothing. The high-tech industry, the startup nation, really, it's a great story. You go walk the streets of Jerusalem or Tel Aviv or Haifa, you don't think that the world looks like it looks all around. So we are really I think, a huge success story. I'm quite proud of it. I think what we have done is really makes us proud. But nothing is given. We need to see that we use this volatile, changing world, or we use our diplomatic and otherwise skills to change for the better. There's one course where we cannot continue on, the Palestinian. We end this way, we end it badly. We need to change somehow. And I think this is something that the government can do. After these elections, I can't speak for the government anymore, so I don't know what they will do. We'll wait and see. But it's an interesting story that is still to develop before our eyes. Let me pause here, and now the floor or the hall is yours, and I'll try to answer anything from war to peace to classical music, what have you, please. You want to take the question? You want to take the question?
I'll stay here, but
Yeah.
Let me just invite people.
Okay, all right.
So for those with questions, please line up at the 2 microphones and ask questions, not speeches. And maybe we can limit it to 1 question per person. Okay, Nadav.
First of all, thank you so much, Mr. Meridor, for coming here. It was very interesting to talk. I want to ask you about U.S.-Israel relations. So even before the elections in Israel, we saw the situation really poorly between the both countries. And now after the elections, a lot of us, as an Israeli, I can say, are pessimistic about the future, about the relationship. So I want to ask you about the Israeli aspect. You said, what do you think are Israeli steps, Israeli gestures today that the government can do in order to improve this relationship?
Well, I have to admit a problem. I have this old-fashioned habit of not attacking the government when I'm abroad. It may be old-fashioned because the world is open now, and I would say things much more clearly if I were in Jerusalem now. So read me in that spirit. The relationship have known crisis in the past. I remember Rabin fighting Carter in an awful way in the White House. I remember Menachem Begin saying no to Reagan on the Reagan plane on the 31st of August, 1982. I remember Shamir trying to get loan guarantees for the Aliyah from the Soviet Union. Bush, the father, said no, trying to influence the Israeli election in a way, I believe. I remember there were sometimes differences. And I remember, by the way, a student came to me, one of your students came to me, asked me about the Israeli-American relationship, our dependence. When I told her, until the mid-60s, America didn't sell one bullet to Israel, she didn't believe it. She said, America wouldn't sell us a rifle, nothing. We got it from Russia, from Czechoslovakia, from France, the whole airport. So it's not been always that Israel is totally dependent. But having said that, the Israeli-American relationship are of great importance in many ways. We take it for granted, but $3-point-something billion a year for our defense, over $100 billion since Yom Kippur War, is not something light. I mean, with all due respect to the numbers, we take it as if it's there. And it's there because of you, because of the Congress, because of the presidents, but it's not easy. And the help that Israel gets diplomatically in the world is sometimes America stands alone, sometimes not alone. It's not something that is simple. And I must say, as a Jew, as somebody who knew what it means, like all of us, all the Jews here, what it is to stand alone when nobody is with you. We have the world with us on many things. We had the Let My People Go done from Israel and from Washington, and we had the Soviet Jews out because we have been not alone, but with the coalition that we were able to build and others were able to build. We have the world agreeing with us on Iran, in most cases, on Syria, on all the bad guys, on ISIS, the world accepting us to the OECD just recently. There's one topic, the Palestinian issue, where they don't agree with us, if I can understand what's happening around. So the relationship with America is important to Israel. It's not that we have to say yes to every American demand, but some basic things need to be respected. I think that, here I need to speak cautiously, I think that the rhetoric that was used in these elections caused damage, unnecessary damage, and serious damage to the relationship, not only on the personal level. And I'll tell you how I see it. The question of credibility is of great importance. If one says, I'm for two states, openly, in the American Congress, in the Knesset, in the university in Ramat Gan, in Israel, one cannot and should not act against it. Even if you can't bring it about because the other side doesn't want, if you allow settlement activity all over the place, not limited to the areas that you want to annex in the end, the blocks, there is some question mark on your credibility. And the question mark was there all the time. Is it true? Is it not true? Is it serious or not? When, for whatever purpose, you say what has been said, it's damaging. I could use tougher terms. I don't want to. It's damaging. Not that the man said this or that, but are you serious? If not, what do you say to us? You say that you're going to continue like that until when? There is a way, by the way, not to withdraw. I'll speak in the end, not this year. And then you have, as we did in 1948, 49, after the War of Independence, we annexed the territories that we conquered, and we gave every Arab the right to vote, and we had the majority, the Jews majority in the state. You can annex the territories, but you need to give everybody the right to vote. You can't be South Africa, that used to be. You can, on the other hand, give up the land, if there is peace, or at least not annex it by settlement. But you can't have both. You can't say, I'm not withdrawing, but I'm not giving the rights. So this goes back to the values that are common to us in the American. I think you need to set a goal. It's not clear what the goal is. I think, and I said it publicly, so I say it here, Israel should say to itself, the government should say, what is the goal territorially? I think a good goal is we need, in the end, to have Israel and the bloc's part of Israel and Jerusalem. Hard to get, yes. Possible? I think yes. President of America said several, United States said several times, 67 is not going to be the end line. It's going to be a basis upon which the end line will be determined. including swaps to be agreed upon or changes to be agreed upon. Bush wrote the same thing. So the world understands 67 is over if there is an agreement. But you need to treat differently. You need to have a settlement activity that focuses on the blocks. Gush Etzion, Meridor, whatever they are. But if you treat everything the same, the world will treat everything the same. You may lose what you have. I think it's a mistake. And once you say, I don't mean it, whether it's for purpose of election or other thing, it's less important. People believed you. Now, if they voted for you, what are you saying? I didn't mean it. I think damage was done here, and the damage was done in the rhetoric about the Israeli Arabs. I don't want to go further into that. So I think that what needs to be done now, I don't know if the government will do it, I cannot speak for the government, but the gap is wide. President Obama said it in television some hours ago. I saw the excerpt or saw some piece on it on the net, on the web. I think we need to prove that one is serious. If the government were smart enough, or accept what I think is right, to say we continue settlement activity, we don't stop it, but only in the blocks, nothing over the blocks, it will change the world in a minute. Can they do this? I think they should. I don't know whether they can do it or not politically. There are other things you can do with the Palestinians that can be done, not solving all the problems. I'm not sure we can do it now. I don't think we have a leadership on the other side that has the courage and the will and the capability to do it. But we can do a lot to start moving in a direction that is coherent. We want these borders. We declare these are the borders that we want, adding this number of percentages, 6, 5, whatever the number is, all the blocks that we think are part of Israel. The settlement activity will be there and not in other places. On the other side, we start to give the Palestinians, with agreement or without agreement, their authority. We stop being the police on the 1st of January, we stop being the zoning and planning on the 1st of February. I can continue like that, and we show that if they are not, I'm not moving the army out. I've done it in Gaza, not I. Enough, not again. If you have an agreement, we'll move the army out. If not, we'll show you that this is what we want. If we don't, we create an impression that we want to hold the whole land and never give them rights, which is something that is not tenable in the long run. I think there's time for decision, and this is what I thought we should do, which is why I'm here and they are there. Otherwise, I wouldn't be in Princeton now, but I would be in Jerusalem. Yeah.
Let me ask a question, if I may preempt our next questioner. I think the audience here, most Americans understand the importance of security to Israelis. You live in a bad neighborhood. You're threatened both in your immediate borders and beyond the immediate borders. And yet, many people in this auditorium have seen the film The Gatekeepers, in which former heads of the Shin Bet were critical of government policy. During this election campaign, more than 150 former generals spoke out against the government's approach. Why is there this disconnect between a sense that Israelis want security and yet they're willing to trust a government that's come under criticism from security people within the country?
Well, I'm not good at psychological analysis, but I think that people count on the army to do the job anyway, and they wanted somebody that they thought will be tough against what may be proposed by the other side. Again, I know my position. I said it publicly before the election, but I would say the following. Be a regular Israeli. People promise you that we can have an agreement, and they see around them people beheading other people, people exploding in bombs, and they don't want it near their home. They don't want to take the risk. So there's no appetite that used to be in the past, and they don't think it's realistic. So this may be one of the issues. I don't think, by the way, again, I'm not an analyst of the election, but if the pollsters were right, and there were all the pollsters saying this, or practically all of them, Likud was going to lose. Because what you said, because people said that enough. But in the last 2 or 3 days, there was a reversal, because the Likud seemed to be losing and voting. Again, I don't want to be an analyst. I don't want to sound patronizing, but many people vote not because of what they think, but because where they belong. How many African Americans vote Republican? Few, because you vote Democrat. Jews used to vote Democrat in the past. Some people, because of their society, because of the vote, because they belong to a certain group that votes a certain way. If you're a fan of, you don't have soccer, Manchester United, you can't be Manchester City the morning after. You're there, whether they're good or bad. So people say, I'll tell you a story. I went to some medical exam I had to take an x-ray of my teeth in Jerusalem, and a month ago, and the man in the lab there said, you loved me. Oh, the Likud people treated you so ugly, it's awful what they did to you. Oh, great, said no, man. What are you going to vote? Likud, of course, what can I vote? So, I mean, this is not always about the ways, it's about where you belong. But don't forget, it's not America. In America, you need 51% or 50% plus to be a president. In Israel, you don't. Netanyahu got less than a quarter of the people. 24-point-something%, I think. I don't remember the exact number. It's a different system. It's a parliamentary system. And he was ready to be hated by 70% if he solidifies the base of 25%. And he got 25%, or more or less. 30 seats is a quarter of the Knesset, 25%, more or less. Now, there's a coalition game. I can take this guy of the Haredi, this guy of the other guy, and pay this. And that. It's politics. It's not the American system. In America, you go to the center. If you want to be Republicans want to win the election, they can't have. I don't want to mess with the Tea Party leading them, because they will not have the election. I think so. They need to go to the center. And the Democrats, the same way. Left-wing liberal may not win the election as right-wing Republican. We need to go to the center. In Israel, it's not the case. You solidify your base, and you see the rhetoric becomes more extreme rather than more moderate in the election. So this may give some explanation, but I'm not an expert here, and this is only a guess, not an analysis that was checked by anybody. Yeah, please.
Yes, let's assume that negotiations and sanctions fail with the preventing Iran from getting a nuclear weapon.
Did they fail? Did they fail, you say?
Let's assume that
Did
they fail.
Yeah, okay.
The days of bombing a nuclear reactor to prevent a country from becoming a nuclear power, I think, are gone. Now, I don't have empirical evidence, but I'm going to assume that Israel has nuclear weapons. Here's my question. If Iran does develop a nuclear capability, can Israel coexist with an Iranian nuclear capability, given the fact that, as irrational we think the mullahs are, countries want self-preservation and they don't want to be destroyed by a nuclear holocaust?
Well, it's a good question, of course. I don't know what will happen in the negotiations. Will it end up with an agreement or not? I think, and I said it, I was in Washington just before coming here in sort of deliberation with the administration under some auspices on the Iran thing, and I think I said it several times. America is not that weak, and Iran is not that strong. And the pressure should not be on Washington, it should be on Tehran. There are no sanctions here in the streets of Princeton. There are sanctions that strangle the life of people in the economy in Tehran. So no agreement, no agreement. Continue with the sanctions. Don't rush. I think it's a mistake to rush to an agreement. Now, having said that, however, there may be or may not be an agreement. Agreement cannot, as I say at home, cannot erase from their minds what they know. Whatever we do, they will remember things, and the scientists, they know things. Some nuclear activity will be allowed because President Obama already said that it will be allowed. So this is, you can't draw this back. What can be achieved, I think, is an agreement that has three components that are important. And I won't quantify them, but I'll say what they are. One, you need to take them back as much as you can from what we call breakout capability. One speaks of several months, one speaks of a year, 2 years. It won't be 2 years, it won't be several months. It needs to be closer to 2 years than to several months. I don't want to go into that. To be sure that they can't, even if they want, they can't do it overnight. They need a lot of time for that. Second, we need a very good monitoring and verification system. The old one didn't work well enough. It did quite well because the IAEA, the International Atomic Energy Agency in Vienna, had inspectors that found a lot of things, but we need more. I don't want to go into details. There's additional protocol they need to sign. There is a way to have a much better system. By the way, the system agreed by them, with them in the agreement, and Israel and America and England, Britain should have their own way of continuing to have surveillance of what happens there. So we need that very strongly because they will cheat if they can. I think they know they're transparent now, they're afraid to cheat, but a long time you don't know. So you need to have this verification system. I think it needs to be reached. I don't know the details now, but I think it can be done. The third thing is more elusive, but more important. They need to understand that if they breach, in no time there's reaction. There are results. Almost automatic. Now, there won't be anybody giving automatic right to start a war because somebody did it. But results may be, or consequences may be in terms of military strike, in terms of sanctions, all sorts of things. It cannot be left unclear, because they will never breach in a big way. Say they can have 500 or something, they won't have 1,000. They have 501, 503. What do you do with that? This is the way people try to erode agreements. So there needs to be the resolve and the mechanism and the clear steadfastness that you will not be allowed, and if you do that, you'll be punished on the spot. So one needs to think how you do that. America alone, America with the UN sanctions, with the Russian and Chinese, in a way that you don't need the Russian and Chinese to agree to a new resolution. I don't want to go into details, but these are the three elements. Drawing them back as much as one can, having a good verification monitoring system, and consequences that are very clear and very effective. I think this can be done, I'm not sure, but I think with enough resolve and patience, it can be done. Now, if it's not done, or if they break out sometimes and have a weapon, again, it's a delicate question. I never use the Holocaust as a metaphor, or I don't think we are there. 70 years ago, the Jews were without anything. They had justice, not enough. And now we are strong. The nation of Israel is a strong nation in many ways. Whether we have what you think we have or we don't have, again, I can say, but I shouldn't say. But they think we have it. Good. And we have a strong army and a strong economy and a good science. And it's not something that people can decide overnight. So it's dangerous. It's the mullahs, it's dangerous. There are people who have direct line to Kodesh Baruch Hu, to God Almighty. They know what he wants. They're extreme. I cannot guarantee anything. But it's not that all our policy stands on prevention. We need to prevent, but there is defense and there's deterrence. There are three legs to this. I don't want to go further than that. I don't want to say it's not important. It is important to try to prevent them, and I hope that we'll be able to do that. Israel is not dependent only on success. You know, the story is that some years ago, foreign sources, that's how we call it, the Syrians were about to have a nuclear bomb by North Korean project that built a reactor for them in eastern Syria, in Deir ez-Zor. Now, according to foreign sources, the Israeli Air Force took action, and it doesn't exist anymore. But I can tell you, if it's true, that we didn't know of it for long years. If we were waking one morning and find that they have it, well, should we pack and go to Geneva or to Princeton? No. There are other things we can do. It's not over. But we need to fight. It's an important fight, not because a bomb is going to be dropped tomorrow. I don't see it now, although I can never guarantee anything, but because it changes the balance of power in the Middle East. Because if there is peace, I spoke of it earlier, more Arab countries come to terms with the existence of Israel. It's not because they, as far as we have found out, neither President Sadat nor King Hussein never, ever in the youth joined the Zionist movement. Never. They're Arab rulers, and they don't like the fact that we are there. But they are realistic. Israel is strong, and you cannot beat them, join them. And the strength of Israel, among other things, stems from the understanding they cannot get rid of us, because they think we have what you said we have. So if there is a balance there, it may change the whole balance. I don't like it. So I think we need to fight against it and to try to bring it about that they won't have it. But don't be hysterical about it.
My question was, can they coexist with a nuclear Iran? What's your view on that?
The fact that I did not answer directly your question is not because I didn't hear it. Yeah.
You mentioned earlier that the tendency in the American political system is go to the center, which is not necessarily the case in Israel. And
the tendency, sorry,
is to go to a center type in order to win the general election. There is a tendency not to be at the edges, which is not the case in Israel. And the talk is now about a right type government. And I know that this is not the topic of your talk, but would you like to...
You make it a topic of my talk. Never mind.
To comment
right.
on whether a center government in Israel, basically Zionist camp and Likud plus whoever joins, would be in a better, would be into the benefit of most of the people in Israel. And given that Prime Minister Netanyahu said that he wants to act to the welfare of all Israelis. Would you have any advice on how to get there? Thanks.
Well, on my wish list, yes. If there were a way that the government that will be sworn in some weeks, I suppose, to be a more centrist government rather than leaning all on the right wing, I would love it. Is it feasible and possible? A good question. On one hand, I can explain why it's not possible. Then I give you some ray of hope, but I'm not sure I'm right. Netanyahu, the way he is today, is the moderate of the Likud. You hear people in the Likud now to say that Herzog and his party will not, I think, join the government. I hope, I think they won't, if the government continues the settlement activity all over the place. This was a basic thing. Will Netanyahu be able and ready to tell the Likud, all right, we settle only in the blocks, not if he's ready, the main stumbling block is dealt with. Will the Likud go with him? Bennett, of course not. I don't know, I'm not sure. So on one hand, one can say he's not that strong in spite of his victory because the Likud is more extreme on that. They say it, I don't want to quote people, but I know them all. On the other hand, he is now the the only leader of the Likud. He is the one who made it for them. They owe it to him. Can he take them and say, I'm going there, and if you don't want, go away, go home, don't let me do? I'm not sure. Maybe, maybe not. Is it in his genes? I think he understands he needs a more centrist government. I don't think he wants a right-wing government, but he rode this horse that much to that direction that he needs really to be a great rider to come back to the center now. We'll see. I don't give it much chances, but if I'm wrong, you'll say, we heard this stupid Meridor didn't know what's going to happen. So I don't know.
Thank you very much for speaking here at Princeton. I thank you as a Princeton townsperson. I wanted to mention another paradigm shift that is going on in Israel that is very similar to a paradigm shift here in the United States. Prior to the election, I was reading, and I apologize in advance to Paul Krugman or to Tom Friedman. I don't remember who wrote the column. I keep wanting to say it was Krugman. But they mentioned about the fact that there's a great social inequality in Israel. And this really, I thought really hit me between the eyes, that the wealth in Israel is concentrated in the hands of 20 families. So,
I'm not one of them.
Oh, I'm glad to hear that. But what I wanted to ask you was, can you comment on this, and how does this affect the peace process in terms of the wealth being so concentrated with so few people? Does it even matter who is leading Israel?
Well, I don't see any connection with the peace process. All these families, most of them would vote Labor anyway. Labor in Israel represents the rich guys, not the other side. But this is another anomaly. If you look at the Israeli economy, in the last 30 years, from 1985 on, it's on the rise all the time. In the early 80s, some of you were already born, like me. We had a huge crisis, hyperinflation of 200% or 300% per year, no foreign currency, the balance of payments was awful, the budget deficit was in huge numbers, and the economy was practically collapsing. Why, by the way? Because after the Yom Kippur War of 73, 74, the government mistakenly spent so much money on defense that the economy collapsed. And for the enemies, whether you collapse because of tanks or because of economy, it's all the same. And then in 1985, the government, National Unity Government, with the help of the economic professionals of Israel from the Hebrew University, more than anybody else, Professor Michael Bruno was passed away. He was the brains behind it. My wife has something to do with it, but I don't want to praise my family here. They got the whole government to admit that they made a mistake and let's correct it. And we had a stabilization program that was passed by the government, National Unity, Peres and Shamir together. And from hundreds of % of inflation, we went to 20, 10. We are now at zero inflation, 2, 1, 2, for several years already. From a budget that was an awful deficit, we have a more or less balanced, a very small deficit budget for many years now. We learned the lesson. of the reckless policy of giving everything to the social needs and the army, and then who pays for this? So the Israeli economy did marvelously well because of the stabilization, liberalization of the market. We did away with socialist bans on all sorts of things, import, export. I don't want to go into all of this, liberalize the markets. And then the huge aliyah from the Soviet Union. 1 million people came, many of not only creating demand in the market, but creating a lot of talents. And so we did really, really great. You look at the world, I don't think of any other country similar to us that did the same. And the Israeli economy, as I said, now is, I think, $40,000 per capita GDP. It was almost double what we had, I think. I don't remember the exact numbers, about 20 years ago. And look around Israel, see how people live, walk the streets, and see how life is. The downside of it, the other side of this coin is that the gaps that were created were widened. In a way, because we are part of a global economy now, not anymore a small market that buys for itself, and produces for itself, and sells for itself, but a smart Israeli doesn't sell to 7 million Israelis, he sells to 7 billion people in the world. And he competes on NASDAQ or in the New York Stock Exchange, he competes with people in Palo Alto in his innovative skills. It's a huge economy, startup nation that you all read of, I think, is what we are. So I think the economy is doing great. But those who made it made a lot of money. Not only the few, 20 families, or not only 1 million people, more than that. Salaries are up, and the standard of living is up. Those who didn't make it, because they don't connect to this world, they don't speak English, they don't connect to the internet, they don't know how to do the new economy, the new world, stayed behind. Their standard of living improved, but only little by little, and not as big, and the gaps grew. And it's a huge problem because of the feeling. I mean, you always think relative to the neighbor. I get this, but he got much more. And the government needs to deal with it. The problem is it's not easy to deal with it. It's not easy. I said earlier, the government is not that strong. They cannot dictate to people. Because people, you don't want me to act here, I'll go to another country with my business. You have this problem, not easy at all. The interest rate is too high. It's not the case today. I'll take money somewhere else where they give me. The government is not that much in control. But it's a huge task to try to somewhat narrow the gaps and create more competition. By the way, Mr. Kahlon, who may be the finance minister, was in charge of the communication ministry, where a huge reform took the prices down by more than half because he introduced competition. There needs to be more competition. It's fighting some, I don't know, the family, some of those big companies, competition in food and other things, and we can do better, but it's not going to be easy because the talent goes out if the government does not sit on it. And it's an open world. The talent gives you more and more opportunities, and gaps are created. So we need to deal with them, but I'm not, if I were there, I don't know they can do it within a year or 2 years. It's a long process, and it needs to be tackled. And whether there are 20 families or 40, I don't know how you measure it. Yes, there's too much concentration of power in certain places, but we need to deal with it. But some of them collapsed. We'll see how it develops. One of them, the Dankner family, the man collapsed and is in problem now. Another big guy like this is now in deep trouble. There's no guarantee you succeed in that. If there's competition, many of them may have to reduce their wealth because it's built on no competition, on monopoly. Yeah.
Last question.
Hi. I would like to ask you, how seriously should we take Obama's statement of reevaluating and maybe taking the Israeli-Palestinian conflict into the UN, and if so, how is it going to affect the progress, or maybe not progress, and the relationship in the region and the conflict?
Well, I have no way to assess the president's seriousness. I should assume he's serious. If I were to joke with you and say, as he said, he believes in Netanyahu, that he doesn't want this, 2 states. I believe Obama, that he means what he says. I don't know what he will do, but let me say the following. I don't know, I have no idea, and I hear rumors from people who also don't know, but guess also things from within the administration, so I don't know. But if there is something that may happen, it has to do with the Palestinian issue, not with Iran. I mean, Iran will either have an agreement or not. And I believe, I hope it will not touch the security ties with Israel, as it did touch with Kissinger, with a reassessment. I don't think they will do that, as far as I can tell. On the Palestinian issue, it may not be the Americans who initiate it, maybe others will initiate. The Americans may not veto a resolution in the UN. Now, I'm not afraid of this. It depends what the resolution says. I'll tell you a story. About 3 years ago, the Palestinians wanted to go to the Security Council to have a resolution for the conflict. And the Americans and the Israelis said, no Security Council. We have a veto. I mean, the Americans have a veto. So they went to the General Assembly, got what they got. I had a dissenting view on this in our midst. And I said, I think that we should agree to the Security Council because the Americans have a way to control what's happening. And I think we should offer a resolution, not they. And I tell you what the resolution that I offered was. It was not accepted, but I tell you what it was. We should call for establishment of a Palestinian state. The border end of conflict. End of conflict. I'll touch it in a minute. Not a state and then continue with the other things. And the parameters are that's the end of conflict, no refugees to Israel. Second thing, the borders will not be 67, but 67 plus agreed about changing the language of Obama. Security, or whatever you say, negotiations should start immediately. Before proposing it in the government, I asked privately the UN emissary to the Middle East, to the peace process, said, check for me with the Palestinians. Will they accept it? Came back, no way. If you say no right of return, they won't accept it. I think we should have offered it. And let's see where the dog lies. It's because I saw it, I don't want to go back to history, with Arafat and with Abu Mazen. In my reading, I may be wrong, nobody can prove it, this is the crux of the matter. The PLO was not built for territories. It was built for the right of return before 67, right? 65 was the year. And if they are ready to give up the right of return, which some people say they are, it's a huge revolution, I will go with it. But if they are not, people will know the problem is not exactly the borderline, which is an issue, not Jerusalem, which is a big issue, is that they don't accept the end of conflict. They will go for 2 states, like Hamas will go, but continue the demand on return to Israel. Mind you, they're not out of their homeland. They can go to the homeland, not to the home they had in Ramla, they go to Ramallah. They're not in exile, but not to Israel. The whole idea of partition, which is very heavy, for people who think the whole land is attached to us, and I'm attached to it. I'm not feeling a foreigner in Hebron or in Beit El. It's part of my history. But I'm ready to divide because there's so many Palestinians who don't want to be part of me. I don't want them to be part of me. So we need to divide the very beloved homeland. But the idea that we'll divide and then they will come to live with us, what do we do with that? So I think we need to put the exclamation mark here. We are ready. These are the parameters. These are the principles. But end of conflict, no more claims. Well, this was, I think, a good idea, but it was not accepted.
Thank you very much for coming. I know I speak for all of us that it would probably be unanimous if Dan were running for office. Hint. And we want to thank Dan and Lior Meridor for visiting us in Princeton. Thank you.